Good morning, everybody. We're on.
Good morning.
Good morning, colleagues. It's great to see everybody and to welcome you back. Happy New Year to everyone. Hope that you and your families are well and healthy, that you've had some time to relax and reflect, and that you're ready to go as we gear up for the start of spring 2022 in just over 1 week. I'm Joan Ferrini-Mundy. I'm the president of the University of Maine and our regional campus, the University of Maine at Machias. I'm happy to be talking to you this morning, and I will introduce my colleagues in a few minutes. First of all, I'll make just a couple of comments. I want to thank you all for attending and for bearing with us with the change in topic. This originally had been about budget, but that's been superseded by what I think is a more relevant and pertinent topic for everybody. It's pressing for all of us, and that is how we are thinking about and dealing with COVID right now as we get ready to reopen next week. We will reschedule and have a budget town hall sometime soon. Let me acknowledge first that so many people have struggled with and are still struggling with COVID and its sad and difficult consequences. As the highly transmissible Omicron variant is now responsible for 95% of COVID cases in the state of Maine. The case numbers in Maine continue to increase. Number of hospitalizations is increasing. And so we are sympathetic and aware that so many in our community are coping with the results of that. I want to thank everybody who's working so hard and has been to keep everyone as safe as possible. The Science Advisory Board, the T3 testing team, our UMS COVID operations group and their University of Maine sister system leader, Chip Gavin, the wastewater testing team. Our testing will resume next week. And all those who staff the booster and vaccination clinics, including UMaine nursing students who are also working around the state. And to all of our administrators, faculty, staff, and students who've taken responsibility and been vaccinated. 89% of our on-campus population is fully vaccinated. You've been boosted, you've registered your vaccinations, boosters, and exemptions with point and click. You have continued testing as required, and there will be more of that. And you're isolating and quarantining as appropriate. We owe you all a lot of gratitude. Thank you. So the point of today's town hall, which I'll just briefly describe, it's to help us reconnect to what we have been doing so steadily across this pandemic, but it's also to reframe a little bit the conversation for where we are and where we are now headed. We are at a new place with this pandemic, and you know that if you're reading the papers and watching the news and looking at the national discussion and the discussion in the state of Maine. Dr. Shah is doing a number of very interesting presentations from Maine CDC, and those are worth watching. The conversation is shifting because this pandemic is ongoing and endemic. And there's movement from doing all that we can do to try to prevent more cases of this disease, to recognizing that even doing all that we can do can't stop Omicron. We need to use every single tool we have: vaccinations, boosters, testing, appropriate face coverings, distancing, avoidance of large gatherings involving food, as well as the new treatments that are emerging daily and the science that helps us. We need to use all of that, of course, to focus on preventing serious illness and deaths. But here at UMaine and UMaine Machias and across the system, we're making a little bit of a shift along with the rest of the country from focusing only on how policies and rules alone can have significant impact to how those policies and rules, together with new and heightened expectations for taking personal responsibility for where we are, that's what we need. Even if everyone does everything perfectly right now, this pandemic is raging on. So what stays the same? We are committed here at the University of Maine to continuity of learning for our students and continuity of the operations that support that learning. As Chancellor Malloy wrote last Tuesday, we're going to start on time with classes beginning as scheduled 2 weeks from today on January 18th. He wrote that 2 weeks ago, last week. We're working to do this with in-person learning, consistent with the current plans for about 90% of universities across the country, and of those, 98% that are starting on time. So we will be here, we will be in person, and we will be adjusting and watching and being very, very careful as we go. And that's what we wanted to talk to you about today. We continue to update policies and practices. You'll see those announcements coming in the next couple of days, using what we've learned over 2 years for how to combat the spread of COVID and how to avoid serious illness. We're watching the science, the patterns around the world of Omicron to see when and if it begins to peak, what we can learn about booster and vaccine efficacy with new variants, what's currently recommended for face coverings, and more. So all of that, all underway. But as the biggest point I'd like to make right here really is that as we did last semester and those preceding it, we're doing this together as a community, looking out for ourselves and each other in the best ways that we can decide as we go forward. In science tells us this variant is probably more contagious than Delta, but may result in milder cases. And particularly for those who are vaccinated, there may be a shorter transmission period for those who have the disease. So here's what we're going to do. In making a decision to open on time and to come back to campus, we considered all of the options that you can imagine, I think. We've read every article, we've talked to all these different groups and leaders, we've discussed them thoroughly, and by we, I mean the system leadership and the campus leadership, as well as faculty, staff, and students. And we've landed where we are with a priority on keeping learning going, largely here and in person. Going fully remote would simply be too blunt an instrument to use at this time. Paraphrasing what some of our deans said, we're no longer waiting for an after. This is the reality we are in now. There isn't some magical later when we aren't living with some level of COVID. At least that's how it looks right now. And we need to be a university right now. And universities are open for their students, for their state, and working to keep learning going as best we possibly can. But doing this well will take all of your help, your flexibility, accountability, and compassion, and willingness to adjust, because these next 2 weeks will be crucial. We'll watch what happens, and then we'll see what we need to do as we go forward. In a New Yorker article recently, Scott Gottlieb, who was a former FDA director, said that what we need to do now is to try to empower individuals to act, to mitigate their risk, and to mitigate societal risk collectively. And you see this happening across the university, across the country, as we work to say, pay attention to what's out there, watch the news, watch guidance coming from authorities, and then do the very best we can to keep each other safe. We don't do this lightly. If you watch what's happening again around the state, particularly in K-12, which has opened, but which is bumping up against all kinds of challenges. In fact, the Commissioner of Education talks about schools facing unfathomable challenges. We probably will too, but we're going to do our very best to keep learning going and to do this together. Practically speaking, a lot of the details are being worked out right now, and you will hear more about them in this call at a high level, and then in communications over the coming days. We're trying to think about all the scenarios imaginable. What happens when students can't get here because they've tested and they remain at home in isolation and they can't be here in class, or they're close contacts and they're quarantining? What about students who are here in Orono or nearby but not well enough to go to class? Or faculty, staff, and students who can't be here because their children or others close to them are ill, or because schools or daycare centers must close? All of those circumstances are what we face right now. And so we're trying to figure out how we manage this together flexibly to serve everyone as well as we possibly can. We'll need to be reasonable and accommodating. How everything will work. That is, what happens when a professor needs to offer instruction remotely or in hybrid form for a few days because a few students can't be there, or because the professor, him or herself, is ill. We're going to have to take those case by case and figure out how to proceed. We'll take the semester in chunks. We'll watch what happens in the first 2 or 3 weeks and adjust as the data and the science and our circumstances dictate. So with that, I'm going to now turn to our panelists and ask each of them to say a little bit. They'll introduce themselves and they will then make a couple of comments to get us started, and then we'll turn to your questions. And thank you for sending those questions in. I will begin by calling on Vice President and Provost John Volin.
Thank you, Joan. I appreciate that. So along with the president, I would also like to acknowledge and thank all of you who continue to work so hard in your efforts to keep everyone as safe as possible and to continue to be there for our students and the entire community. I mean, we're 2 years into this pandemic and it's not been easy. As you heard, President, we continue to follow the guidance of research scientists and the CDC on how best to manage COVID on our campus. And we hope to minimize these large outbreaks and the worst impacts of COVID on our community, especially serious illness or hospitalizations. You know, thus the vaccine mandates required, masking, and all the other aspects that you heard the president say. We know that Omicron is highly contagious and Delta is still circulating out there. and that likely other variants, will probably emerge. And so there really is this shift from eradication to mitigation and harm reduction in how we approach COVID. So, as you've probably read and heard quite a bit, the new normal with COVID, unfortunately, is not living without it. So at the start of this semester, we may see some increased rates of absenteeism, but since COVID will be here, with us for longer than those first 2 weeks of the semester, as you heard the president say, we are planning on starting as planned. Because we know that there's, an academic and social and emotional toll of remote learning, and we're committed to giving our students as normal a year as possible. Last fall, FATI showed a very reasonable approach, and we're accommodating with students. And we received very few negative comments or feedback. It says a lot about our FATI and our staff who are always here. I would continue to encourage FATI to work closely with their chairs and their directors and deans as we navigate this semester. And as the president said, we will continue to monitor the situation and adjust as needed. So thank you again. Really appreciate everything that you do.
Thank you, Provost Volin, and we'll of course have questions, and Provost Volin will jump back in. I'd next like to turn to Vice President Robert Dana to introduce himself and make some comments.
Thank you very much. Well, welcome everyone. We've missed you over the break, but here we are getting ready to resume our very robust academic experience, social, academic, intellectual, and things have changed. There's no question about it. So my mantra to myself has been to keep breathing, breathe deeply, and try as best I possibly can to relax, to stay in touch with what's being written in the scientific literature, what you can find in the popular press. One of the things that's surely changing, and we're changing with it, is that the degree of personal responsibility that people must take is ever increasing. But that's the world we live in anyway. That's the academic collegiate experience. We want people to be self-reliant, and that's going to be true here. And so we're amplifying our prevention messages, taking care of oneself, reporting when one isn't feeling well, masking, hand washing, all of the things that you know about. We're still encouraging people to be mindful of gathering in large groups, hoping that everybody would get boosted and vaccinated if they're not already done that. But as a campus, we'll come together, we'll behave much the way we behaved last semester. We're really not in a position, if you will, to control this in a way that we can put everything into a bubble and isolate and quarantine our way out of this. It's going to have to be all of us coming together as a community, and we'll do it. I feel very, very confident. We're smart, we're industrious, we're capable, and we care for each other. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Robert. Joanne, would you like to introduce yourself and make some comments?
Hi, good morning, everyone. Joanne Yastrzemski here, Vice President for Finance and Administration and Chief Business Officer. I would just say that I'm sorry that I'm not here to present the budget today, because that would mean we wouldn't have to be talking about COVID again, but we'll do that later. We'll get to the budget later. I would just say that emphasize a couple of words already mentioned this morning, and that includes flexibility and care. And I just would remind everyone to take care of each other at this time. We've got such shortages in healthcare and in our restaurants and here at the university that we all have to keep our patience and just watch out for each other and take care of each other and show great compassion, continue to show great compassion this time, and be careful and use good common sense, as already has been mentioned. And I guess that's where I would stop, Joan and letters.
Dan Qualls.
Hey, I'm Daniel Qualls. I'm the Vice President of Academic Affairs and the head of campus at the University of Maine at Machias. We're excited to start the semester back up. This last fall was very successful. We're really proud of our students and faculty and staff and how they complied with all the protocols, and we had a very small number of confirmed cases. And we continue to work closely with the UMaine system and our partners at the University of Maine as we start up this semester.
Thank you, Dan. And Zach Wiles.
Good morning, everybody. I hope you're all doing well as we're finishing up winter break here. My name's Zach Wiles. I'm the president of the undergraduate student government at the university. So as a student myself and as the president advocating for students, I feel obligated to just share with you a little information on student preference on learning, at least with the people that I've talked to. People come to the university for an education, yes, but they also come to the university to engage with other students and to engage with the events and activities that the university offers. Students pay their hard-earned money or go into debt for this experience and expect it. For 2 years, obviously COVID stunted a little bit of what the university has to offer students. But from the last semester in the fall, I heard nothing but good things from students. And the University of Maine had very impressingly low numbers in regards to COVID. And this semester, going into this semester with 97% of fully vaccinated resident students, I see it as a good option to go in person, obviously proceeding cautiously, as many have said before me here. And those who want to be online will take the online classes that we have to offer. Those aren't going away. But students love to talk with students. They love to be with students. They love to go events with students. They love to see what the university has to offer outside of the classroom. Aside from that, mental health has become more important than ever with our students, just because of the isolation that students have faced when you combine COVID and education in the same place. Sitting in your bedroom for class is much different than getting up, getting ready, and going to class. I think that offering that to students again will be very helpful, as we have already done. Continuing that will be good. And working with the Counseling Center has been one of student government's big initiatives this year. So hopefully that will continue. And that's all that I have for an introduction.
Thank you very much, Zach. We'll go to Dick Young.
Thank you. Dick Young, Executive Director of Auxiliary Services. Also, my role is on the COVID operations group. I'm in charge of the testing protocols here on campus and a lot of other things that support those areas. Just to let you know that, as people said, it's switched to the mitigating factors as we're moving in this direction. But in terms of our operations, we are still going to provide the same level of testing and mask availability and those types of things on campus. Plus, our messaging will be strong throughout campus. So that I believe is in place, and we'll continue to work and change as things move forward. We are testing at Estabrook Hall. We have the schedule posted out there, so that's available for everyone to see. We are requiring negative tests for students to come to campus, or that everyone will test regardless of their vaccination status here on campus. And we've got that set up, and we're going to be doing that through a unique setup with a self-observed testing process, which we're excited to deploy and get moving. And that's happening today as we speak. We just started with our first student today, so that's good news. Also, we will be working diligently to get and see if we get the plans of booster clinics here on campus to help support the community. That's what I have, President Ferrini-Mundy.
Thank you, Dick. And now we'll turn to D. Nichols to introduce himself and also to kick off the question and answer period where we have your questions coming in. We appreciate that. Perhaps we could put up the slide again with the reminder about where to send your questions. A lot of these questions are very particular and very specific to individual cases, and you are going to get the answer quite a lot. Need to talk to your department chair or the head of your school, your dean. So there will be some general guidance, of course, but flexibility will be key. And with that, Dee, please introduce yourself and get us started on some questions.
Hi, President Ferrini-Mundy and other panelists, as well as people watching us. We welcome you. I am D. Nichols. I am in the College of Education and Human Development and serving as president of the Faculty Senate. I'd like to just build upon what Zach said. Faculty are also very excited about being on campus. We love working with our students. We love to see a vibrant campus. We definitely want what's best for our learners here at the University of Maine, and that is to create a quality experience. However, we do have lots of questions, and we've seen quite a few questions already popping up on the Q&A of this forum, and we're moving those questions also over into another Google document so that people like me can help manage those questions. So we'll do our best. I would like to let you know that the Executive Committee of Senate has been gathering a lot of questions as well. And we have reached out to the President and Provost, and they were very quick to respond. And we've been having ongoing conversations and discussions about how to proceed. So I'm going to go ahead and get us started with the questions. And they're kind of broken into categories. And the first set of questions, President Ferrini-Mundy and others, really deal with teaching in the pandemic. We can put it under that heading. And so the first one there is really about why would the university not allow remote instruction for a few weeks at the start of the semester, or at least until after the Omicron surge has peaked, especially for instructors who are elderly or and are more at risk. You've kind of addressed it in your opening, but if you'd like to elaborate on that, I know that's a hot question for faculty.
Thanks, Dee. I'll start, but I'm going to turn to the provost. And there are a couple of related questions. Here's one: if an instructor tests positive for COVID, are they allowed to continue teaching via Zoom? But back to the first one, which I've now, let's see, lost it a little bit. The question is sort of what?
It's back to, you know, why did we make the decision to not move remotely for the first couple of weeks until we had a little bit more data about Omicron?
Yeah. But I wanted to pick up a bit on the wording of the question. Why would the university not allow remote instruction? We haven't said that we're not allowing remote instruction, right? Our hope and our expectation is that largely we will be here in person, but we know that there will be cases, and there are several examples right here already, where faculty are going to need to make a change. They're going to need to adjust, offer remote options for their students, possibly change their modality, and I'll let the provost speak to the process for that. But I want to emphasize our flexibility and our need to adjust as situations emerge. So this is going to be hard, folks, right? Because we've been a lot more clear and definite, I think, in the past couple of semesters than we can be now, because there will be so many different circumstances. That's why I keep coming back to the basic principles: continuity of learning, continuity of the operation, as much as we can possibly do it here and in person. But John, perhaps you'd like to say more on this.
Yeah, so I think one of the key words I think you'll hear a lot is flexibility, and so one size does not fit all. So like in that first, the related question that the president talked about, you know, if an instructor tests positive for COVID, are they allowed to continue teaching via Zoom? Well, of course, it depends on the severity. So if someone is asymptomatic or they're feeling up to it, yes, they can, but they'll need to work with their department head or their school director and their dean's office on those type of things. But absolutely, I think that's the key here is one size really doesn't fit all. And to kind of get to that question, why don't we just go remote the first 2 weeks? We don't know where this peak may happen. And at the same time, if we said that right now, with a little over a week left before classes start, that is also incredibly disruptive. And as we know, there's a lot of classes that really can't, they can't on a dime go remotely. A lot of lab classes, as an example. And so I would just reiterate we are going to be looking at that flexibility and working with your department chairs and dean's offices on this throughout this. It's going to be taken in chunks, as the president said earlier. We'll just have to keep monitoring and adjusting as this semester goes on.
So John and Joan, we've had these conversations. So you know, as a faculty member really had a pressing need to make a change, not just a temporary change, but they really felt like I've got to make a change to my modality. The process would be, as you mentioned, talk to your director or your department chair, start that conversation there, move the request up to the dean. Eventually it makes it to the provost office. And each one of those can give a weigh in on how that can proceed. And then another path is, you know, to ask for an accommodation, I think through ADA. So those are like more, you're talking about more long-term changes. But if a short-term comes up, if you're sick or a family member's sick, or you know, even if like we had to go attend a conference, you can make those changes to your modality, but you still would like us to check in with the director and the dean so that all the advising centers can be aware of what's going on. I have another question, John, just on this kind of topic. What about students who also test positive and are in quarantine or unable to make it to class? Does this instructor have the flexibility to offer that kind of Zoom option for students?
They do. They absolutely do. That's what happened last fall, right? When students, you know, would be out for a week or two. The faculty, as I was saying earlier, had a very reasonable approach. We're very accommodating. I mean, one thing, and there's another question here from Associate Dean Tim Cole saying, you know, if students are demanding remote modality for an in-person class. No, faculty are not required to change their modality, but we would hope that they, you know, during those situations where students have a legitimate reason not to be in class for a week or two, to try to help as much as possible.
Thanks. So as we talked earlier in the week, you know, as an instructor who's been doing this for quite a few years, you know, I've always built in that type of flexibility for my students, but that is optional for the instructor to make those types of decisions, whether they wanted to do it asynchronously through a web brightspace or have some type of Zoom that would help a student navigate when they couldn't attend. I'm going to look at a few other questions that are here. You know, one of those is, if we remain face-to-face classes, how will we accommodate the student needs? Oh, we just answered that, never mind. Is there a trigger threshold for making a decision to go online?
So I'll start with that one. Again, we're already seeing big numbers. You know, we're seeing positive cases when we don't even have everybody back on campus yet. So we're watching that. But if you watch the sort of national discussion, you'll see that there's a bit of a move away from looking at positivity rates. The testing is now ubiquitous, right? People are testing through our T3 process, but people are doing you know, at-home test kits and working with their own physicians and so forth. So we can't even really know what our numbers are actually. Our focus, I think, is shifting to take care of people who are ill, help people understand what it means to self-isolate or self-quarantine without getting a message from Maine CDC or from us, because there will be those needs as people are trying to be responsible on their own. So that makes it very difficult to talk about a threshold. It's not sure what it would be a threshold of, but we certainly will be monitoring and adjusting. And again, trying out as a start a way of doing this, which has a lot of responsibility, sitting with individuals, with faculty who will need to be conferring with their chairs and deans, where we're looking for sensitivity, for flexibility, for compassion, with that overarching principle of we're trying to keep the experience going. It's not the answer people would like. I know so many people would like to have just some tighter, clearer numbers and decisions, but this is how we're going to do this. It's going to take a lot of work from everyone and a lot of communication.
So there's a couple of other questions that are here. I mean, we've kind of answered a little bit of these, but I just want to pull it out again. So the scenario is they have a class, a graduate class that meets for over 3 hours. It's in a small, not so well ventilated area or room, and they really do not feel comfortable teaching. In that setting with what's going on right now. And their question is, can they switch to Zoom? And I'm going to do my best to answer that, John. The answer is it's possible, right? There's two paths: work with your director and your chair, flow through your dean and the provost for those to be reviewed, or ask for an accommodation through ADA. You want to build on that, John?
So actually, in that case, in that example, I would suggest that they try to find another room, a larger room to accommodate that if they really have those concerns. So students have signed up this semester for a particular modality, right? And so changing right at the last minute, an in-person class to remote the whole semester is something that we are really trying not to do. There's always an occasional case where that we have to go that route, but it's we're really trying to accommodate the modality that the students signed up for and registered for, and is thinking they're going to be joining in next week. And so that's one piece. And then you're right. I mean, they can go the ADA route. Usually it'd be done earlier than this, but that's always an option. That's a pathway that they can do if they have health issues themselves, the faculty member.
Thank you, Provost Volin. Some of the other questions, this is more of a suggestion that's there in this category about teaching in the pandemic, and it really gets back to communication. And so the person who posed the thought says, is there a possibility that our president and the chancellor can continue to make statements to students and to remind them throughout the semester to be flexible, that they should be flexible along with the faculty as we fight to keep this in-person learning going? Do you want to speak to communication at all?
Sure, I think that's a great idea. And again, the kind of an idea that will come from faculty and that we need to have those ideas coming in. I think I see, we have Zach right here. Our student government and student leaders can be very helpful also in making sure those messages are clear. The students who are living on campus have an incredible network of supports and helps through the residence life system, and therefore we can try to amplify some of these messages there. It's going to be a challenging and growing experience for all of us, really, to try to manage this.
Thank you. We're going to move over to concern for safety, but there was one last question that was up there, and it was like, can I permanently change the modality of my course? And I would say, as a faculty member, of course, follow the normal processes for doing that. We have great reasons in our college, for example. Our graduate students have wanted more online classes, and that's been something we've been working on for quite some time. But there's a process for doing that, and just to follow those normal processes, and then to remind faculty that when there is a request to look over the schedule for whatever semester, that you check the modality that seems to be best, again, assuming it's approved by your program and others. I'm moving on over to concerns for safety. We may come back to teaching as more questions come in, but the one that's up here for concern for safety, is there a need to disclose to a class that there has been an exposure to COVID if a student tests positive?
And go to Dick or Robert there.
Well, I'll start. Any individual who has not been vaccinated and who tests positive, the appropriate folks where there are close contacts will, to the best of everyone's ability, be notified. We expect, and it's certainly been true to this point, that the classrooms have been pretty very, very safe places because people are required to mask. There is, sanitary procedures in places, and students have done a great job. So we have got to continue to do that, and we cannot weaken our resolve in that respect. Dick, you might want to add to it.
I compliment what you said, Robert, that currently there is not a need to publicly announce that in front of the class. The ones that need to know will know, and most likely, knowing the students that I instruct, they come tell me or text me, so I know. So I think that's where that's at, and the safety procedures are in place. all the same sanitary procedures we had in place last semester in place this year, and being stocked and checked. And there are numbers on everything out there. If things are low, make the phone call, and custodial staff has always been really responsive, filling things up. So I think that'll be the same this semester as well.
So following up on this, so, recognizing that the Omicron seems to be spreading more rapidly than the Delta variant and other variants that we've seen, how confident are we that we can actually keep up with the testing on a regular basis, and maybe building on that?
Well, I should just say first and foremost, safety has been, the priority of the University of Maine and UMaine system since day one, and we've had great outcomes. Omicron is a different variant, and it's more transmissible. We have a very multi-layered testing procedure. We've now advanced these self-testing opportunities, which is going to take a great deal of pressure out of the system. That is our testing system, so people can do that. It's reliable. They're PCR tests, easily accessible and reviewable every single day. So that's going to take a great deal of pressure out of our system. And as Richard Young indicated, the testing sites at Estabrook Hall will continue, and that's for symptomatic and asymptomatic people. So right now it looks as though if people use their usual methods, plus the addition of the self-testing, we'll be in good shape.
Thank you. Thanks. So this question is an interesting one to me too. It's the president, you noted in your opening remarks that 89% of the people on campus are fully vaccinated. And the question really is, does that mean 11% of our on-campus faculty and staff and students have medical or religious exemptions? Why don't we have 100% vaccination?
So I'll start, but I'm gonna turn to Dick to help me be sure that we get this correct. And if we need more data, we'll get that and get that back out to everybody. But there can be lots of, so fully vaccinated at this time with CDC definition means 2 doses of an approved vaccine. And so there are perhaps people who, for a variety of reasons, don't yet have their second dose. But I'll turn to Dick. Note also, of course, that there are special testing requirements for those who are not vaccinated. And that is one response to these numbers. But Dick, more to say on this so that we're sure we're being precise here.
Yes, the data that the 89% is a combination through the campus data, trying to extrapolate all the staff and faculty, because it wasn't exceptionally clear, but our residence halls are close to 95% of our student population there of that. And there are some there who do have exemptions, and they are required and followed up to test at Estabrook, and actually our compliance is tracked, and we know who those people are. And our Res Life staff has been very good of going out and reminding those folks to get back down to test during the week. They had 10 days to do that before they're noted as non-compliant. In terms of the vaccination percentage, we've got a number of groups of which is part-time faculty and instructors. We have some other students who are coming in this spring who we've been tracking and working with quite readily to get them fully vaccinated. And remember, they may be fully vaccinated, but again, until the card is uploaded into the system, we won't get that number to record. So in my book, fully vaccinated means 2 doses, and you got to upload your card in the point and click, and then we get the compliance report. So those numbers are based on the number of people who are and who place their cards up. So there's been some delays on those cards, and we're doing the same for the booster shot. We are collecting and requesting people to put their booster shot vaccination card up into point and click as well as we move forward to February 1. So we have an estimate there of a good number of where we are with the boosters as well. So it does take a little time from getting it up into the system, but we are tracking it.
Dick, you might also mention that not being, not if you're in that 11%, there are procedures that you must follow. That is, yes. We're not just saying it's okay, you're not vaccinated, yes. You're not testing. There are compliance responsibilities, and students can be cause to leave the university for not following them. Faculty and staff, of course, that's a human resources issue, but it's not that you just can't do it. You've got to do something that complies with all of the expectations.
That's correct, Robert.
I'd like to say thank you. I'd just like to use this as an opportunity as an elected member to represent faculty that back in May, the Faculty Senate unanimously passed that we would like to require all faculty, staff, and students to be fully vaccinated. We're very happy at the rate that our students have done that. We hope our faculty and staff can get that also done at the same level. So just like to use that as an opportunity. Will there be a strong campus-wide recommendation to avoid in-person meetings? We have college meetings, department meetings, faculty senate meets. We met face-to-face in the fall with the Zoom option. Should we be considering, moving more online?
So this is a great question. Actually, this may be a little too flippant. I think what there could be well, let me think. Will there be a strong to avoid in-person meetings? What there won't be is any campus requirement to have all meetings in person. That's what I wanted to say, right? We're doing a lot of meetings by Zoom and have been all through the break, even last semester. I think we want to stay flexible and sensible here. Small rooms with food and drink are a bad idea, seems to me. I certainly won't host any meetings like that. And if we're able to get our business done by Zoom and keep things going for certain meetings, I think that's a reasonable thing to do. Also, if we're able to distance and the masking becomes very important. I'll take this opportunity, Dee, if it's okay, to turn to the mask question. And again, I'm going to look to Dick and Robert on this one. There are a couple questions about the efficacy of cloth masks, questioning their use and wondering if various types of surgical masks might be serve better protection. Stand by for some guidance on this coming very soon. But indeed, what we're seeing nationally, we're taking that very much under consideration here. There will be supplies of certain types of masks, and I'll turn to Dick to explain that. A big deal for masks is that they need to fit properly and they need to be worn properly. And so as much as anything, making sure that people have their noses covered, making sure that their masks fit tightly, and certainly going toward these surgical masks will be, I think, advantageous for all. And we need to keep publicizing that. But Dick can say a bit more about the supply and how that will work.
Yes, thank you, President Ferrini-Mundy. As we've done in the previous semesters, there are stations around campus. Those will be the same, and there will be surgical masks. These are three-layer masks that we have in inventory here on campus. They will be delivered to sites and maintain the stock. Obviously, if there's a phone number there, if you see one that's been diminished, don't hesitate to call. Everyone has the right to go ahead and make that call and get those filled up, and the FM staff will respond and fill them. So those are going to be readily available. All the sanitization methods are going to be available. In terms of your mask, what the CDC is recommending now is proper fitting of the mask is critical. It's not just wearing a mask, it's properly fit with a nose clamp that closes down, hugs the chin, and comes in tight on the cheeks. And so that's what they're advocating for. And that's what we'll be having in our messaging here on campus. We'll support that.
Let me just bounce back quickly on the question of meeting. That's a great example, which the president covered. It's a great example where we use our own best judgment. We have the technology, and we're already seeing lots and lots of people doing what seems reasonable and not being too, overly adherent to some unknown rules, but just to be sensible, if you will. So there are a lot of people meeting by Zoom meetings and cutting out meetings where they don't really need to exist. And one thing to add to Dick's message is we have some 60,000 masks on hand, and those are replenished as needed.
There's a question about, can faculty require students to use surgical masks in class? You can encourage them, you can point to them to where they are, you can remind them about fit. all of the things that make sense for us with what we know now. There are also questions about the N95 masks. As I understand it, that gets more complicated. There are fit issues, there are OSHA issues. And so I don't think I don't have more to say on that. Dick may know more about this.
Your reference is correct, President Ferrini-Mundy. There are fit issues and there are OSHA issues especially when we talk about employees. And so at this point in time, we're still we're still getting information from the systems office, and we'll continue to read that and go with it. And if it becomes something that we can move forward with, we will. But at the current time, we're not distributing those out.
From a personal perspective, I have a daughter who's a nurse in Colorado. She's talking about double masking, so I use the double surgical mask. It's not as restrictive, if you will, as an N95 mask, which does cause quite a lot of restriction in the airflow, but it's an easy adaptation. There are plenty of masks to do that.
So again, strongly recommend and encourage students to use the proper mask. You can point those out. Probably requiring is a different conversation that we would need to have an ongoing, continuing, but definitely recommend, encourage, make sure that the students know that they're available. And do your best to make sure that's happening. If you're having a problem with student compliance, which I did not have at all in the fall, just again, reach out to Robert Dana or others and let them know. So the other question I have is about the return testing. And we've had several conversations about this over the last couple of weeks. My understanding is that we really are requiring all students to be tested, but we have a lot more direct control of the ones who are residential, that there's going to be kits in the dorm rooms. Do you want to elaborate on that, Annie?
We did send a letter to all students expecting that they come to campus with a negative test. It's highly encouraged. Students who live in residence will be also required to come with a negative test, and they will be tested on the first day of arrival, which you heard Dick talk about. Estabrook will be available to off-campus students and faculty and staff, and we'll also have the self-testing regimen. Many people are coming with Binax antigen tests. They're coming with other PCR tests. So we'll have a lot more data than any community that I'm familiar with. Dick, you might want to add to that.
That's very well spoken, Dr. Dana. We are, with the testing is available, you can say it's available to everyone, regardless of their vaccination status. We have the ones that need to do it, but everyone's welcome to participate in the testing. And we are testing all. Return is all students are required to test. Estabrook is available for those from off campus, and they all, as Dr. Dana said, received a message and expressed how to go ahead and make an appointment to get that testing done. So we'll be watching that as well.
I think from a faculty standpoint, things I've heard as a concern is, hey, I teach a 8 a.m. class on Tuesday morning. Students who are non-residential who come in, will they know to go get their test beforehand? So I know there's some anxiety a little bit around that, but the message has gone out to students, to all students, to have a negative test before coming to class.
I'll add to that what we're hearing from other institutions is that when that happens, cases are getting identified and students are staying away. I mean, that the news is available very broadly, and we know our students and their families are concerned about their health and watching what happens. And so I do think the message is out that that testing is one of our most important tools, testing and masking and distancing.
And one thing to add to that, last semester, we had a tremendous number of students who did miss classes. They did not go to classes because they were symptomatic, not of COVID, but of more run-of-the-mill respiratory viruses and illnesses. And so our students are very adherent to the idea of protecting others. And a lot of faculty asked about that. Was that indicative of a large COVID presence? But really, 90% of the people who were getting evaluated through the health services were found to have other respiratory illnesses. So we're probably going to see that continuing, is that students will be good community members. I fully expect it.
So the next question here is kind of dealing with the ventilation. And so what would the process be for a faculty member who has concern about their room not being well ventilated? Or what if it's a student who's also a similar concern? How would a faculty member go about? So the question indicates that the department purchased some different air filtration, but they only have a limited number of those. Any suggestions on air ventilation?
Sure, I think we'll turn to Joanne. Our facilities folks are fantastic, very tightly connected in to the COVID operations group, of course. And Joanne, I'm assuming that there would be a pathway to address those requests.
Yes, I think the work order system for sure. I think we could perhaps send out a communication, communicating how best to get that kind of air ventilation system installed that you purchase.
Okay, thank you. Joan, I think you can see these, and John, it's kind of a complicated question that came about the COVID portal that they had received. Is there anyone who sees that question, can you respond to that? That seems really specific and one that I haven't heard yet.
Okay, so for those who can't see the question, I'll just repeat it and give everybody time to figure out who can address it best. So this is from a faculty member who's vaccinated, boosted, has verified with point and click. They got a message that they are expected to participate in asymptomatic testing for the semester. And they haven't heard of anyone else getting such a message. They were also asked to provide a consent form. I can say myself that I signed up for an asymptomatic test. It's today. And I also was asked, I got a text message that I needed to fill out again the consent. So I definitely know that happened, but this sounds a bit different from this. So Dick, this may be one we need the person to check in with you directly. Or something.
Technical problems. Yes, that would be great if they would reach out to me, and I can look into that with the people who operate the system to see what might have been an error, because that's a little above and beyond what normally goes out.
Right. I mean, we really are encouraging that people test, and there's plenty of access right now to doing that, but that's different than what would appear to be sort of a requirement.
What if we complete the test with an at-home kit? How do you verify that? I did one yesterday. I can give you my word, it came back negative, but.
Okay, good. You've reported that now. That's a huge problem. We don't necessarily have a great way to do that, as far as I understand. We have a process that we'll use with our students coming in where we'll track that, but how we move that into the system, at least to my understanding, is still not fully smooth.
We track positive tests. We track all positive tests and negative tests for safe return. We are tracking those there, but during the year, we don't track all negative tests on campus.
So if D had tested positive, was he to report that to you?
He would do a self-report online, the web self-report form, and then he would be contacted from there, and that would then go in the logger, just so everybody knows, and then that would be verified with the systems office, and he'd be released from testing for 90 days once it's in the logger. So if that self-report form is critical to kind of key that up and get it going.
We'll make sure we get that publicized again and noted for everybody.
I was just going to say that seems a good part of the communication process. A lot of the questions here are also talking about, why do I need to get the booster, and if I'm doing the testing. Any thoughts to that?
Well, I might just start by saying we know that the booster is highly advised, scientifically based, best practice, and it's part and parcel of the entire COVID mitigation, harm reduction, procedure. So one doesn't really substitute for the other. So, from my perspective, we're seriously recommending it. We may well get to the point of requiring it, but one doesn't replace the other.
So I just got a reminder about time. There are still a number of questions that we've not addressed, but as we've done before, we will work our way through all of them, get communications out as possible. And I think this has been really quite a good session because your questions are really deep and insightful, and to me, they show that everybody cares, that we really are trying to figure this out, do our very best to bring our students back. And the people, I think, do recognize the need for flexibility. So we've put up one last slide with a couple of reminders, expectations for spring 2022. That last point, and because we had talked about boosters, we are all watching the CDC, the federal CDC, for their next definition of what it means to be fully vaccinated, where the buzz is that it's likely to include booster, but we are not there yet. However, we're alerting people that could come. But in any case, I just want to thank everybody. I want to thank the panelists for their wisdom. I hope people appreciate that people are being honest and direct. And when we don't have a clear answer to your question, we'll either find one or know that it's something that needs to stay on our minds and that we'll continue to work through. But I do look forward to seeing you and to hearing from you as the semester opens. We'll certainly be checking in on how things are going, keeping track and looking to adjust as we need to. With that, then, I think I will see if any panelist wants a last word, and otherwise we'll close on time at noon.
Joan, I would like to have one. I just would like to reiterate that the questions that are in the Q&A and the questions that have been submitted online, that we are gathering those. We greatly appreciate that. It helps inform the process. It helps us think through things. Questions and concerns are always welcome. Solutions are welcome even more. Be sure to reach out to your elected senators because we can keep this conversation going. And just so thank you.
Dee, I did get a couple of questions on my text messages and so forth, and perhaps the president can address it, but it's important. The chancellor issued a notice this morning, which I think does call for flexibility. I actually find it very consistent with what we're talking about here. But if the president might take just a moment to talk about the comportment of what we're talking about, what the chancellor's talking about, it could help people as they read through that.
Right, so that message came out during this call, but I don't think people will be surprised at the alignment between what we're talking about here in this meeting and what you see in that message. There's just been tremendous close conversation and planning among all of the presidents and the law school dean, among our campus incident commanders and the system staff. This is a position that we're trying to take for the entire system, which is one of flexibility, perhaps a bit more local decision making than we sometimes are able to have because the circumstances are very different at a UMaine Fort Kent than they are for us. And so you will see differences across campuses, but the chancellor's message is very clear that we are prioritizing safety, using everything that we know, but also looking to keep moving forward. So Robert, I'm not sure if that addresses, but I think these are aligned, that we are all headed in the same direction here.
I read them that way too. And, I think there's just a very big backbeat of we will change as change is required. We'll be open, we'll be flexible, we'll be accountable to each other, supportive. And it's an imperfect situation because as you, the president, has said many times, the virus is the operating principle here. So it's,
yeah. Okay, then. Well, I just want to thank everybody again. You'll be hearing more from us and keep your questions coming. Really do appreciate the great work that everyone does and wish you the best for the rest of the week. And also, of course, then when we jump in next week in a bigger way. Thank you all again.